So welcome this evening to the Southwestern Wales branch, the third Zoom meeting we've had. Both previous ones have had quite good attendances, and we're up to 45 people on this one, which is certainly more than we probably would have got had we got a room in Bristol or anything. This evening, we're doing something very different to last time. Last time we talked about the historical context of buses on the Rhine Peninsula. We are bang up to date at the moment now. We're going to hear from Josh Goodwin, get it right, who is the man behind BusTimes.org. Now, I suspect any of you that's been out traveling around will have used this and been surprised at how innovative it's become. And it felt a very good idea, if we could, to get Josh to just give us a bit of the history behind it and how it all fits together. We all know that people are trying to encourage open data and more information to be available, but it's how it's actually interpreted and presented to people that actually is very important. And the one thing I was surprised at one point is that Josh really is a one-man band. He will take us through the story, I'm sure, but I think it's phenomenal what it's achieved. Anyway, I think I'll hand over to you, Josh, before I end up giving your talk for you. And if everyone else would go on to mute, that'd be very helpful, so we don't hear anyone coming in with a cup of tea halfway through. Thank you very much, and over to you, Josh.
Well, thank you. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah,
thumbs up. Thank you. Yeah, well, I would like to start off with some recent historical contexts from before I became involved in anything. In the 90s, we had the legendary Great Britain bus timetable series of books, and a website that developed from that. And then we had the government's Transport Direct. And this involved the creation of things like Travelline for websites and a call centre, and a website called the Transport Direct portal. And this was had a mixed reception, apparently, some embarrassing press, but I guess it was an ambitious project. And probably the most enduring legacy of this is things they did, like making a database of every single transport access node, which is a very flowery way of saying bus stops and train stations and tram stops. And I could go on about problems with this, but I think it's quite impressive to list all the bus stops in the country. And you can imagine that local authorities have lots of priorities and not very much money, so maybe they're not going to keep this up to date. But you could say it's world-beating anyway. And here's an example of maybe one issue. Here's a local news story about a bus appearing to go to a nightclub that's been closed for 8 years. And we all got examples of pubs that have turned into Tesco Expresses, and the name of a bus stop hasn't caught up. But I guess that's life. And one of the other things they created as part of this project was Trans Exchange, which is a sort of standard for computer systems to exchange information about bus timetables and related stuff. And it's anyone who's worked with it will say it's incredibly complicated, and the instruction manual is hundreds of pages long. But it's very powerful as well, and we'll get onto that a bit later. Meanwhile, in America, Google invented Google Maps, and they began to add public transport information to that, starting off in Portland, Oregon, and then other American cities. And to achieve that, they invented their own standard for that sort of information. And it's much simpler, 25 pages long compared to hundreds. And it's become a sort of worldwide standard called the General Transit Feed Specification, and the G originally stood for Google. And anyway, then in 2010, Gordon Brown announced that Naptan would be available to anyone to use for free. Previously, it had been well used by local authorities. But maybe this would make great things possible or not. And there's also the Travelline national dataset, which was all the timetable information used by Transport Direct and others like it. And that was similarly made available for free, which is amazing, really. It's not always as accurate as we'd like it to be or up to date, but I'm not going to be ungrateful. And then in 2014, sort of two collided and transport information was added to Google Maps. And maybe this was sort of politicians being distracted by shiny things and people from Silicon Valley looking cool. And then Transport Direct, the port website, closed down. And there's a small public outcry, and 16 people signed a petition, but the decision stood. And then years passed and people got on with using apps and websites like Travelline and Google Maps. And then at some point I came across this open data that had been previously released. And in 2015, I thought, what can I do with this? I sort of made a silly little website with a map with all the bus stops in the country on it, and then a way of seeing which bus routes stopped at those stops. And it looked a bit like this. And that was that. And then over time, somehow people discovered it. It turns out that when people look for bus information, they type stuff into Google, and then they find my website maybe. And I guess again, feedback was mixed. Initially, there weren't any times on the website, despite it being called bustimes.org.uk at one point. So I sort of took that feedback on board and I worked out how to display times and then even timetables. The pictures I've got from my archive are all of stuff going wrong, but it's okay. And it's very easy to lay out a timetable badly, and it will never be as good as a professionally produced printed timetable or leaflet that someone's taken care of and drawn out a map by hand. But I think it's hopefully useful to have a sort of lowest common denominator thing to fall back on. So time passed, people kept using the website and they sent me emails sometimes. Some of these emails were about things like lost property, which was hard for me to help them with. So I sort of worked on making myself look as unofficial as possible and directed them to bus operators' websites and phone numbers so they could get the help they needed. Then other emails were about things like asking, how do I get from Bedford to Biggleswade? So I tried to help them by finding out that information. I used the website. And then I realized, oh, this is quite difficult. And no wonder they've emailed me about it and they can't find this for themselves. So that sort of led me to make stuff easier to navigate, and the cycle sort of continues. And when I sort of turned my attention to real-time passenger information, which are these computer systems usually looked after by local authorities, and they get information about where the buses are and then calculate a prediction of when the bus will arrive at a particular stop. And they power these electronic screens you see outside on the street, and they can power websites. And I guess having just a simple list of departures makes sense for one of these black and white screens, but I thought, oh well, people are starting to use smartphones and stuff like that. And we've all got these high definition screens in our pockets. Why not just show me where the bus is on a map? So that's what I did. And I thought this was quite good, and it was sort of quite hypnotic just watching the buses move about. And it's actually useful to see when exactly where a bus is. Has it been diverted because of roadworks? Is it stuck behind a broken down tractor? And then I could gather all sorts of exhaustive information where exactly where the bus has been. And then I had the idea of, and even what a way of identifying the vehicle. And then I had the idea of colouring in these blobs that were moving about on the map, which was sort of a bad idea because it makes the route numbers much harder to read. And there's a lot of buses, it turns out, and they're all painted different colours. I'm maintaining my own data, and I'm starting to feel even more sympathy for the Naptan and the Travelline people and what they're having to do. So at some point, I let users edit this information themselves. And that's sort of grateful to them. It's a bit like Wikipedia or something. And it's a community of people almost, and it works. And time passed, and then in 2017, the Bus Services Act received royal assent, and this is probably best known for all the stuff it entailed about franchising and things like that. But I was interested in the provisions on open data, which only apply to England, but would maybe have a knock-on effect in the devolved administrations as well. So time passed, and there were consultations and things, and then at the end of 2019, the Bus Open Data Service was launched by the government. And the idea behind this was that operators would share timetables, which we already had, but maybe in a quicker fashion, because with the previous Travelline database, it was a bit frustrating. You'd expect something on a digital thing to be updated instantly, but in fact, it would often take a few weeks for this information to filter through the various computer systems and organizations and end up on a website. Then vehicle locations, which I like to think I've been a pioneer of, you could say, but in a way that was national and not relying on individual local authorities paying for systems themselves. And then fares, which I think was really ambitious and much more difficult than anyone anticipated, as we will see. And then shortly afterwards, a pandemic struck. For me, this wasn't too bad. Fewer people using the website, that's fine. But for operators, all sorts of work they had to do. Lots of timetables changed in short notice like never before. But in a way, this was quite good timing. This new Bus Open Data Service, I guess, meant they could upload timetables, and then I'd be able to make use of them quickly. And this timetable data is slightly different to the previous Travelline data. It's sort of, in some cases, it includes all sorts of operational information, like a note to a driver to pick up a mailbag, and then for things like vehicle allocations, driver changeovers, running boards, which eventually I'm going to start displaying. They may be useful. You can see exactly where a vehicle goes if you don't need to change buses in this example. If you can stay on the bus and it will loop round. And then vehicle locations. It's a bit of a burden for operators to especially small ones, to have to buy electronic ticket machines with mobile phone connectivity and GPS stuff in them. But they've started to rise to the challenge, invest time and money, and now more buses are tracking on this little map than ever before. And I'm starting to link that up to the timetable information, and eventually it will be possible to predict when a bus is going to arrive, how late it is, are there particular problems somewhere, where would be a good place to build a bus lane, that kind of thing. And now some pioneering operators are starting to share occupancy data in their open data feeds. And hopefully that's useful. Would it have happened if there hadn't been a pandemic? I don't know. But hopefully it's useful to people. I've not had a chance to use this as a passenger myself yet. And then, I guess, fares. As I say, it's more complicated than anyone's imagined, but operators are working hard to try and share this information in the machine readable way required, and it will eventually be possible to find out this sort of information. I mean, I used to sort of pride myself on having the correct change ready for a bus, and sort of awkward timing, I guess, contactless payments come along. It's no longer quite so relevant, but hopefully this is still useful information. And the sort of secondary legislation supposedly required operators to upload all this data by the start of this year. And understandably, that hasn't happened. And I think we're now in a transitional period, and the deadline's now for next end of this year. I expect it will be extended further, and that's okay. I guess it will take as long as it takes. And then the future, I guess, all sorts of things, including disruption information, which Transport for the North been working on. We now have information about roadworks and things like that. And I think hopefully this is useful for passengers. And I don't really have a conclusion. That's as far as my slides go up to. Thank you.
Thank you for that sort of introduction, Josh. I mean, one of the things I don't think it's really come across here is the fact that so much of this is actually automated, that it is just you, and there's a phenomenal amount of information here, and you just take this in from the sources that are available, and it's numerous sources. Your systems process it and then present it to the user. I'm not saying you could go off on holiday for a fortnight to somewhere exotic and it would all just tick over. How much manual intervention is there to try and keep it going?
I mean, I think it's important that it is automatic as much as it can be. So if I'm incapacitated, it's not there's no out of date information sitting there. But also things go wrong. Things are more likely to go wrong when I'm fiddling with stuff and trying to improve it. And I think the quality of it would be improved with some sort of manual editing. So maybe that's part of the future direction.
Yeah, I mean, local authorities always used to say their travel line data was better because they cleansed what the bus companies gave them.
Yeah.
And that could be a debate with the bus companies, but often I know that schedulers could be meeting a deadline, so it may not be quite as pristine as it perhaps should be. But that element's now gone with going across the bods. So that's another interesting area where the quality of data, I mean, might be not quite as good as it has been for a while.
Yeah,
I
I
think
suppose there's a trade-off between, I guess, intermediaries adding time to the process, but also improving it. Yeah.
now I can see already first request is from Mr. Freeman saying, could you stop screen sharing, then we can see everybody again.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And already we've got some hands up, and I'll go for my left-hand corner, which is Brendan. If you'd like to unmute and have a...
Thank you. Yeah, Josh, I mean, it goes without saying your site is absolutely amazing, and, you know, really want to thank you for that. The question I have relates to the maps. I noticed with some of them that there are straight lines between points, whereas other maps actually follow the contours of the roads. Is that because of different GPS systems on different ticket machines, or how does that come about?
If you're talking about, say, vehicle GPS sort of traces, I guess you notice certain places the mobile phone reception is poorer. So the sort of gaps between the points are bigger. And then timetable information, some of it does include exact sort of traces of exactly where the buses go. And some of it I guess I just draw a straight line between each stop. There are definitely ways I could automatically snap that to the map for roads, as it were. I just haven't done that yet.
Okay.
So I think it's sort of better to just draw as the crow flies line than guess which road a bus goes down.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Down along my screen, Andrew Tilsley. Are you there?
Hello, yeah. Yeah, hello, Josh. What percentage of the data currently comes from travel line as opposed to from bus operators' direct feeds? A rough idea, not necessarily an exact figure.
I think it's about half and half now, to give you some idea.
So, okay, because obviously most of the large operators, I think, are on some sort of direct feed,
Yeah.
aren't they? But quite a lot of the small, I call them large, small operators who have 30 or 40 vehicles, still seem to be on travel line. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
How do you decide where to take your data from, Josh?
There's no magic to it. It's just up to me noticing that they've published something on BODs, and then I'll add them to a list if it looks good enough. So there's probably a few I've missed.
Ron, you've got a question?
Yes. Hello, Josh. We have emailed each other in the past, and can I really congratulate you again on such a marvelous site, which is used very often by me and I know others, and have got great benefits from it. I've actually got two questions, if I may. The first one relates to Wales, because I'm from North Wales. And unfortunately, a lot of operators are not making this information available. Have you any insight as to whether this will happen in the near future, or whether there will be an improvement, or will we just have to put up with the fact that a lot of our operators aren't sending the data?
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard a few things, but some of them are interested in that sort of thing. And it's understandable that there's a additional expense involved, and if they're not required to, they choose not to. But yeah, we'll see.
I think part of that one is the fact that it's obviously now become a requirement in England, but it's down to the Welsh government to decide what they will stipulate for Wales. And the likelihood is they're going to go down something similar to England, but it obviously won't be the same because they don't want it to be the same. We'll have it similar. But I suspect Transport for Wales needs to firm up more of what they're going to require from operators. But certainly, from what I've heard, that there's likely to be something which is not dissimilar to BODs. following along at some point. But of course, that'd be behind the timescales that's happening in England. You had a second question, Ron.
Yes, if I may. One of the issues that we, as some of us call ourselves transport historians, is that obviously your information that is available is from the open data system, is current information. What about historical information? Is this something that is kept? And secondly, if it is kept, how can it be accessed? Because obviously you need the software to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I am sort of archiving it somewhere, and I have some thoughts about making historical information available. So it's in a safe place somewhere, but it's and there are several other priorities, I guess, before I get around to doing something with that.
I appreciate the priorities. Thank you very much.
I've got two Richards with their hands up. I'll go first to Richard Kemble.
Yeah, fascinating talk, Josh. All the magic that goes on behind what we see on the screen must take up a lot of server space. Can you give us a rough idea of what size servers you need? Are they within easy reach, or are they kept elsewhere, or in docklands under thick walls or something?
Yeah, it's all in the cloud, as they say. I'm not. I know some people have service in their houses, in their wardrobes, sort of keeping them warm. But I guess I'm blessed by sort of modern technology. It's much cheaper and easier than it would have been 10 years ago, for instance.
Thanks.
Right. And Richard Delahoy.
Yeah, good evening, Josh. Thanks very much for an interesting talk. But also, can I just say what a fabulous site you've got? I mean, it's used so much, and perhaps you don't appreciate, but it's used a huge amount by enthusiasts who want to track vehicles. For instance, you're looking for an unusual vehicle, a vehicle in a heritage livery or something. We needed one for the cover picture of our club magazine a couple of months ago. So I could sit in my office, find out exactly what working it was on, decide where to go, and lo and behold, the bus appears. So it really is an absolutely tremendous resource. And in fact, we were in the magazine of our club in Essex, we're writing about it this month, encouraging more people to look at it. But my question was about something I think Michael touched on, of some operators don't seem to be there in full. And for instance, I've just been finishing a BSOG claim for one of my consulting clients, where they've got Wayfarer ticket machines, they've got tracking, and through the Transmatch dashboard, we can see the vehicles tracking. But when we look on BusTimes, you've got the services, but you haven't got the vehicles. And I just wonder why that might happen.
I don't know.
No,
Okay. Are they making their data available to BODS and the Bus Open Data Portal?
Well, they're buying a service from Transmatch, so I think they're assuming that Transmatch is making that available. I don't think it's down to the individual operator. But this is the kind of confusion that smaller operators are finding. Some small operators I look at, you see that their vehicle tracking data is there, but then others it isn't. But it's not entirely clear why. But I appreciate that's not really your fault. It's you're only using the data that's available.
Yeah, I imagine there is some work involved in getting some details from Transmatch and pasting that into the government bus open data website to set up a open feed.
Yeah, so they're the people we ought to talk to, the ticket machine suppliers. Yeah. Okay, but thank you, and do please keep up what you're doing. It is, I can't stress how much it's useful, what a fabulous resource it is, and I just wonder how you make any money out of it. But that's a rude question, so I won't.
Do you want to answer that one, Josh?
Advertising, which, yeah, there's a surprising amount of people using the website.
Yeah.
And they sometimes click on adverts.
Okay, thank you.
has it become a full-time occupation for you now, Josh?
Yes, for a couple of years now.
Probably wasn't what you were planning when you left uni, but it's
No.
what's evolved. I think Andy Gilmore had a question. Well, his hand seems to have gone down.
Yes, I did, Michael. Hi,
But
Josh.
Hi.
I'm one of the schedulers who produce TransExchange files for BODs and whatever as part of my job. And it's not something I've noticed, but my boss has noticed that a lot of vehicles on the system show a destination as something like 64 to Alton, whereas ours, Stagecoach, using the ERG machines, it will show us 64 to Rail Station or something less appropriate. Is that something you've got any control over?
Yes, I did recently notice that kind of thing. So the data includes destination name and also a NAPTAN stop code. So I'm able to work out a more descriptive name, hopefully, and display that. That's something I've noticed myself recently and changed it as a result.
So are you saying that you use the NAPTAN stop name?
Yes.
I'm still a bit confused in that some operators it seems to show as a town, whereas other, as I say, ours won't show the town. So I don't quite know, you know, how we get this sorted so that it's because obviously rail station means nothing, does it, on a route going from town to town?
Yeah, I'd have to have a look at a specific example to.
Right.
But yeah, I have changed something to do with that in the last week or so, I think.
I might need to have another look then, in that, as I say, within the TransExchange file, there's dynamic destinations, there's various sources of destinations, and I didn't know if we need to set a certain field to make it show right.
On your other Stagecoach companies, Andy, do they come across correct, or have they got similar issues?
No, I think all of us on ERG, all the Stagecoach ones seem to show as irrelevant things like town hall or bus station rather than a place.
It sounds like there's sort of something there somewhere that is taking one element of the NAPTAN field, like the common name, as opposed to the sort of location.
It does indeed, and we'd like to get to the bottom of it so it shows a real place, not a localized place. Obviously.
Dare I suggest he dropped you an email, Josh?
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You could probably cut out the middleman and send a TransExchange file direct across, Andy, and it'd make more sense.
We'll give it a go. It'd be nice if we could sort it.
Yeah. Again, it's improving the data for the end user, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, another ex-scheduler with his hand up is Mike Walton. Yes, Mike, welcome.
Hello, sorry, yes, I'm on mute. I could ask loads of questions, Josh, but I just, first of all, I thank you for doing the whole thing and starting it. It's marvellous, it really is. One thing I would like is a sort of, if there was a possibility of a PDF of, you know, a 4 week's days of operation in some way. But I know you've probably got a lot of work on your hands with what you've got, so I'll put it in as a request, but without saying anything else. You know, if you have time to get round to it, if we can get a PDF out of it of a full service, it'd be nice rather than just be able to get 1 day at a time. But what I was going to ask for you, I mean, you're not just covering the United Kingdom, are you? You're also covering the Republic of Ireland. But that seems to have dropped out somehow. Does that reflect some difficulty in getting the data, or is it just because of the pressure of the rest of the work?
Yeah, well, I get on PDFs. It's on the list. Definitely, it's probably quite challenging to.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing to generate automatically, compared to partially automated.
Yeah.
But yeah. And yeah, at some point I moved from bustimes.org.uk to bustimes.org with the idea of expanding internationally in mind. But yeah, there's extra work. They do things differently there. You can still find Ireland and Northern Ireland services hidden on the website.
Yes,
Maybe not on the
I've found them.
front
Yes,
page. Yeah.
you have to know what they are and what more information about them than. But yes, but they're still there. Are they still up to date, or are they, or do they not, don't they update anymore?
But I think they are updating automatically, but I think that reflects a sort of lack of confidence that they are completely perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Stephen Sellers has got a hand up.
Thank you. Thanks, Joss. I, like the others, would just like to say it's how useful we do find the website, especially when out and about. It really is a powerful tool. My question related to an earlier discussion about particularly what the stagecoach machines seem to spit out in terms of data about bus station rather than, or rail station rather than the town. I'm up here in Stagecoach East Scotland territory, and part of the network is of their express buses is registered in sections rather than registered in end, and that shows up in sections. I was interested in what you spoke about of being able to join together using the scheduling of vehicles, and well, is that something that will come, that we'll be able to see these longer journeys effectively showing up as one rather than just now as they are in sections?
Yeah, well, definitely, I'd say, I agree. That's definitely a very good idea, and it's on the list.
Excellent. Thank you.
One interesting thing on that one, Stephen, with an English hat on, and with my experience with a bit of the BODS service, is the previous employer I used to work for before I retired, we actually spoke to the DFT and we've put through services of the entire length as one timetable. So as it comes across in a coherent way for the passenger, because we believe that was better for the passenger. However, part of the BODS requirements is actually to show the registration numbers as well as part of the download. And I understand it is the DFT may be going away and coming up and saying, no, they've got to be separate timetables for each of the registrations, not realizing the implications of this, dare I say. So we could see, if that comes in, Josh having to do this knitting together for most of the routes down in England as well.
Yes.
But we'll see what eventually comes out of the DFT in the end, but that's where the wind seems to be blowing at the moment. They seem to be going cold on the idea of having it as a nice through service, as the passenger will want to see it, and they want to make sure that they can check it off against the Traffic Commissioner's database of registrations.
Yes, most interesting. Process comes first, never mind what we're actually achieving, yes.
I couldn't possibly comment, I think the phrase is.
Thank you.
I see George Cooper sitting there. Yes, George.
Hello. Yes, I've just got a question about the sort of the data, where the data comes in automatically and is read and processed automatically. And as well as that, giving the general public the ability to sort of edit your data with regards to liveries and such like. How do you sort of make sure the data which is brought in is of satisfactory sort of quality to work with, that it won't pollute the sort of rest of the system?
It's a good question. I guess for sort of physical details editing type stuff, most of it is I have to approve it before it appears on the website. And then timetables, I have a few sort of automatic checks, like if a bus appears to be in the middle of the ocean, I don't show it. And if a bus is taking 12 hours to go between each stop, I sort of automatically flag that up. But otherwise, there's no other checks really.
Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you.
Right. Richard Campbell, have you still got your hand up?
Yes, it's on behalf of David Chalkley, who has got a microphone problem. His question is, how do you allocate operators to areas? For example, Metrobus London operations appear to the public as Go Ahead London, but Metrobus Crawley buses do have Metrobus names, but Metrobus doesn't appear under West Sussex, only Greater London, which is slightly illogical in his view.
Yes, that does sound illogical. I'd say, yeah, no thought has really been gone into it. It's sort of guesswork based on the data. I'll have to have a look at that one.
Fine, thank you.
Yeah.
I've also got one here that says, I have a question when you are ready, Phil G. So are you there, Phil G?
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't seem to actually have the ability to put a hand up on Zoom. I don't know why. The button is not there. Firstly, as someone who works in a local authority, I have to say, Josh, your work has changed a lot of what we are able now to see and do. And my staff are absolutely gobsmacked by how much more data they've got, just simply because we've got all the little buses running around on the BusTimes now. The number of drivers we have now caught out doing the wrong thing just by, and we're all doing it sat at home because we're not allowed to go into the office, is unbelievable. So you're having a good effect in as much as we're able to put a lot of these problems right. And the bus companies are gobsmacked, I think, about the level of information we're now able to get about their bus services. So I thought I would just mention that to you. Going back to the maps that are drawn and the fact that they're straight lines, we're puzzled by what the little dots are along the lines. We know what the arrows are because that shows you where the bus got pinged and you know where it is. But the dots appear anywhere. They can appear in the middle of a field. So we don't quite understand what they're supposed to be or what they do.
That's a good question, and I should probably add some kind of key to explain that. But yeah, the minutes markers say if a bus takes several minutes between reporting its location, you can see that, hopefully. Does that make any sense?
Not quite well, but not in a way that I could explain to my staff. No.
Okay.
So are you saying that you have a series of dots? That means that really the bus has been fairly stationary.
So you might get a arrow at 4 minutes and 50 seconds, and then you might get a dot, and then a dot, and then another arrow 3 minutes later. But maybe I can share my screen and show you that.
While you're doing that, I would just say that that at the moment I'm currently planning a whole week's worth of holiday, half of which is based on BusTimes data. So that shows you how addictive it can all become.
Okay. So I've got this arrow at 6 minutes 46 hours, 6:46. And then one at 6:47. So this is approximately where that was, where the bus was.
6:47.
6:47 exactly.
Ah.
So we can see the bus is reporting approximately every minute.
And if you go up, Josh,
yeah.
If you go up a little bit, like you were, where that loop is, down a bit, it's like the golden shot.
Yeah. So
Left
here
a
it's
bit
clearly
there.
stopped for a few minutes.
Yeah, he's either wasting time or stuck in the traffic.
Oh, I see.
And here it's parked up for a while.
Could that be where the depot is?
So are those the round minute times?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. No, that's useful. That's definitely one bit of information we couldn't get. I know one thing that's puzzling a lot of people as well is that they are assuming that everything they see on there is correct, and they're not understanding why it is that they, as it was pointed out, can say, "Oh, look, there's that bus running on that service. I'll go out and photograph it," and find that it isn't anything like the bus they were expecting. And I think a lot of people are not understanding that when you're in a hurry and you've got to change a ticket machine, you don't go to a lot of trouble at reprogramming the ticket machine to show which vehicle it's attached to. And that I think there's an awful lot of enthusiasts have not appreciated that, and even when you say it to them several times, they still don't remember it.
Yeah, very important. Yeah.
Yeah, I have an anecdotal note on that, Philip. Was last week I was travelling out of Bath to Chippenham on a bus with FareSaver, and I noticed it came up on bus times as an Optare Solo, and as I was sitting upstairs, I doubted that was the case, and I pinged somebody I knew at FareSaver to say I was sitting on the upper deck of his Optare Solo, and he contacted the driver, and by the time I got off in Chippenham, it was showing the right bus. So it's easy enough to correct when you know where the problem is. Right, as you're sharing your screen, Josh, I can't see there's any more people who've got any questions. Have we got any more in the chat, Richard? I don't think so. Mr. Grimmett's put his real hand
waving.
He's you got to unmute yourself, David. We can't lip read you.
I was trying to get it to come to work. It wouldn't work on me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good, it's working now. I couldn't unmute myself. I haven't got a question. I've just got an observation that I hope Josh will be very pleased about. I was on a bus in Somerset the other day, and he pulled up at a stop, and a lady asked if the driver knew of the bus from another company. And he said, "I haven't seen it. I don't know anything about it. Have you got a smart modern phone?" She said, "Yes." "Well, I can give you a website and you can go to it and see where the bus is." So some bus drivers do know about it, not just enthusiasts, which I thought was very good.
Oh, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, I've heard of bus drivers who use it to find out where the bus they're taking over is and whether they really have to get down there to take over, or have they got another 10 minutes in the canteen.
Yes, well, I live right opposite a bus stop, so I use it to see when my bus is coming along. Very useful. Thank you.
One thing, Josh, that's come out of this is it is all about you. And you've heard here how enthusiastic lots of people are about what you've managed to achieve and such like. But have you sort of been approached by some of the larger firms and people like that about, you know, using your data in their websites and things like that? Have others sort of embraced it fully? Are you about to be taken over? And I don't want you to sort of divulge too much about your future as well, but you know, it's such a good resource that, you know, the longevity of it, I think we would all appreciate.
Yeah, I'm not sure about being taken over. And I guess I'm also dependent on the hard work of schedulers and all sorts of people. But yeah, some companies are linking to it from their websites and encouraging their customers to use it. And
you'd encourage that, obviously.
Yeah.
Right, have we any more questions out there? You all seem to be gone quite quiet. I can see no one raising a hand. I'll just flick around, but no. In which case, Josh, I think you've actually shut everyone up, which is well done.
Wow.
I think that was I thought that was a fascinating talk. I, like everyone else, would sort of totally agree that it's a phenomenal resource. It's a phenomenal website. I use it every time I go out. It's very useful for finding where the double deckers are as opposed to the single deckers and all that sort of stuff. So you can trip out and actually get the good views to go with it. So on behalf of everybody, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. We're having a silent round of applause from Mr. Freeman, I see there. And also, thank you very much for all the efforts you put into it. And if you want to engage with the enthusiast fraternity to assist you in any way, I'm sure there's a lot of people on here would be more than willing to help. So on behalf of everybody, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Very excellent.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, and please keep up the good work.
Well done, Josh.